Hello and welcome back to Fred in the Shed and another beginner's guide to CB radio.
On the side slide.
Kilo Alpha 46, Pooh Bear Hamilby.
297. Hey, we got you in, Robbie.
A while ago on the channel I made a series of videos, 6 videos in total, to hopefully get you up and started on the hobby of CB radio. If you've not seen those, I will leave links to all of those in the description of this video, but it's quite simple. Just go onto my channel, go onto playlists, and then you'll see a link there where all of those videos can be accessed. On this video I'm going to be referencing back to those videos. This video is a bit like a signpost video, if you like. Let me explain. Now, since I put up those 6 videos, which have been really popular, and I've had so many positive comments from people coming back onto radio, so thank you very much for those comments. But a comment that has kept coming up time and time again has been from people saying, Fred, look, really enjoy your videos. Those guides are very useful, but what I need, Fred, is a very basic starting guide. I've never owned a radio before. I wasn't around in the day, and I've just bought a radio, and Fred, I haven't got a clue how to even wire it up. I'm a little bit nervous about it. Would you do a very basic starting video? And that's what I want to do on this one. I just want to go through the very basics of setting up, something that I just didn't bother to do. I do apologise for that. You just become complacent on the hobby, and I just assume that everyone knows how to wire up a radio, and obviously I didn't quite hit the mark there. So yeah, a very basic video, this one. I'm going to be starting right at the very beginning, pretty much what you do when your CB radio arrives in its box. For the AM and FM side, I'll be using these 2 Radioddity CB radios, very reasonably priced, and then for sideband we'll be using the CRT 9900 because it is slightly different to set up a sideband radio. So let's get cracking. Let's imagine that you've ordered your first radio. Here it is in the box. What do you need to do? First thing is completely obvious but could be missed. That is, read the instruction manual. A lot of these radios are quite complicated now. There's lots of options in the menu system, and this radio in particular, this CB500, has a lot of options that I've not seen on a CB radio before. One of the things that you need to check, and this is if you're going to be using the CB radio in your car as a mobile radio, at the back of the manual you'll have the general specifications to the radio. You just need to check the maximum amount of amps that your radio is going to pull. That's going to become relevant in a moment. Typical 4-watt completely legal CB radio pulls up to a maximum of 3 amps on transit, and on receive it's less than 1 amp. That can be quite important. Radio itself, as I say, most radios are pretty much the same. This is a very nice little radio actually. I've got this on test. There will be a full review on this radio coming up on the channel. Now, what is the most important thing here is how the power cable is wired. Sometimes you get a 12-volt auxiliary socket, which is absolutely fine. If you're going to use a standard 4-watt radio, you can plug that straight into your car socket. We've checked, it's 3 amps. Most car sockets nowadays, they used to be 10 amps, but I've been told that some are even 20 amps because everyone's using accessories in cars. So if you're going to go mobile and it comes with a socket, then you're good to go. Just going to show you another version of the radio, this little CB27. Now this one is slightly different because this one, if I can get the cable undone, this one just comes with 2 bare wires. Some radios are like this, you don't always get that 12-volt socket. So you've got a couple of options here. If you're going to use it in the car, it might be worth just going onto Amazon and buying one of these little sockets that you can wire yourself. That's probably the easiest way. or with the bare wires, you need to actually wire these somewhere into your car's electrical system. I'm not going to get involved in that, mainly because I really haven't got a clue. I'm not qualified, and all cars are different. If you do want to wire it directly into your car's electrical system, just be very, very careful. I would suggest that maybe you go and get it done by an auto electrician. Just don't start buggering up your car. Another thing you need to be aware, if you're going to start with a high-powered 10-meter radio, especially something like this CRT 9900 or the Anytone 666, these sideband radios, they pull a lot more power, a lot more amps, and it's quite possible that it could overload the auxiliary socket on your car. You really do need to check the specifics of your car, go online, see what the maximum amps that you can pull out of a socket. It used to be 10 amps, but as I say, I believe it's 20 amps. I mean, the cable for a start on these radios is much thicker. So just be aware of that. Don't go plugging this into your socket in your car if it's only rated at, say, 10 amps, because it might melt, potentially catch fire. Now, I'm going to assume that quite a few of you will want a radio where you can swap it out of the car and then have it set up as a home base. Again, if it comes with the 12-volt socket, you can get female adapters versions where this will slip into. They're about 10 quid on Amazon, and that allows you to have bare wires, and then you can connect to a power supply. I'd probably recommend doing that if you have the socket on your radio. Obviously, if you've just got the bare wires, again, if you want to swap it out, you're probably best to buy a 12-volt auxiliary socket, wire it on yourself, then get the adapter. If you're just going to use the radio at home on a power supply and you're not intending using it in your car, you're going to need just the two bare wires. You could unscrew this and unsolder this. Personally, I just basically cut it off and then carefully strip back the wires, leaving about an inch of bare wire at the end. Let me now just show you how you're going to wire this up to a power supply unit, a PSU, to use the radio at home. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using a very old but reliable Bremmy power supply unit. This power supply unit puts out 13.8 volts and 3 amps, and that is perfectly fine for a 4-watt radio. The reason that it's 13.8 volts and not 12 volts is because that is the charging voltage that you'll typically have in a car. With the engine running and the alternator charging, you'll typically get just under 14 volts. Depending on your radio, whether you go with a standard 4-watt radio or if you're going to spend the extra money and get a sideband radio, will depend on the output of your power supply. This would not be powerful enough to, for example, use with that CRT 9900. Now, I'm not going to get too involved in that. I did a whole video on power supply units, from the very cheap ones that you can make and adapt yourself for about £12, going up to maybe £100 for a 30 amp unit. Again, that will be in the description. Just go away and watch that to understand more about power supplies. The most important thing is that when you connect the radio, you make sure the power supply is switched off. There is a risk when you attach the wires to the power supply. If you have got it on, you might get a spark. It's very easy to blow the little fuse that comes in the wire, normally on the positive lead. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get a spare fuse in the kit. If you're unlucky, you're then stuck trying to get a fuse. So just make sure that the power supply is switched off. The next thing is polarity. I know it sounds obvious, but it is quite easy to get the wires mixed up, especially if you're rushing, if you're a little bit tired. Obviously, red wire is positive and black wire, or in this case black and red, so you can see that you could get confused, is negative. Now it's really important you get that right. If you connect this up the wrong way, the chances are that you will blow the fuse in the inline lead, or worse, you could blow a fuse actually in the radio. And some radios, like this one for example, probably haven't even got a fuse inside the radio. There would be a little diode just where the power lead comes into the radio, and once you've blown that, you then need to solder a new diode in. That probably will be beyond the capabilities of most people watching this video, so you have to be really careful. Now when it comes to power supplies, you'll notice that on the connection poles here, they are hollow. Now there's a reason for that, and that is you can use and you can buy and use what is known as banana plugs. These are little plugs that can go in, and it makes connecting the lead to the power supply much easier. Now I'm not a big fan of banana plugs. I have used them. I do think that if you've got, say, a few little CB radios, they're very easy to swap in and out on low powered radios. However, I did have a problem where I put banana plugs on a more powerful radio and they actually started melting. Also, sometimes with the banana plugs, you do seem to get a little bit of a loose contact. And again, that's what you want to try to avoid. Those little sparks on the wires will lead to problems with the fuse blowing on the radio. So personally, I would recommend that you stay away from banana plugs and do it the old-fashioned way. When it comes to attaching your wires to the power supply terminals, just make sure that the wires themselves are nice and twisted, nice and tight. Now when you look at this, you've got a clamp nut to clamp down on the wire. That clamps on a clockwise thread. So when you wrap the wire around the post, you want to make sure that you wrap it in a clockwise motion. If you do it the other way, anti-clockwise, when you tighten down the clamp nut, you will be in effect undoing the wire. Now some power supplies, and this one has it, they have a circular drilled hole through the middle of the post. That's quite useful for securing the wire. So what we can do here is, although you won't be able to see it on camera, I'm going to push the wire through the centre of that post, and then I'm going to wrap it in a clockwise fashion, as tight as I can with my fingers, and then just very simply going to make sure that I tighten the locking nut as tight as I can. Make sure you get a really good contact. You just don't want any arcing. There we go. So that wire is now really secure. Same thing with the positive wire. Again, this one is drilled. Your power supply may or may not have drill holes. It doesn't really matter. I'll do it the other way this time. So this one, if it hasn't got a drill hole, again, just carefully fold the wire around the post in a clockwise fashion. Get it as tight as you can. Hold the wire with your fingers and then clamp it down. And as you clampen it, it will tighten that wire onto the power supply. Just double check you've got the polarity right. You'll be surprised, I've made the same mistake. We've all done it. We've all got that wrong at some point. When you're happy that your wires are on the correct terminals and are nice and tight, you can go ahead, switch your power supply on. And now your CB radio, that should come on straight away. Just one thing worth noting, when you switch off the power supply, although the light has gone off, there may be some residual current still inside the power supply. There's normally a couple of really big capacitors in there. So it's a good practice that when you switch it off, just leave it maybe for 30 seconds before you undo the wiring, because you just don't want any type of spark. So next thing now is the antenna connection. With the radio off, we'll have a look on the back. Quite simple, just have a standard PL259 antenna connection. Now depending on your antennas, and I did another video, I know I keep saying this, but there's a whole video on mobile and home-based antennas. If you buy a mobile antenna, the antenna will come with the coaxial lead attached on a long lead, and the plug will already be soldered on the end, so that's nice and simple. If you're going to set up a home-based antenna, you will not get the coaxial cable with it. You have to buy it separately. Now, you can buy coaxial cable, you can buy it just plain simple length, and then you can solder the plugs on yourself. If you're completely new to this hobby, I would suggest that you buy the cable as a patch lead. Try and work out how much you're going to need, be it 5 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters, depending where you're going to set your home-based aerial, and then you will get a patch lead, and that will have 2 soldered plugs on the end. It will save you having to do that. When it comes to connecting the plug for the first time, just one thing to notice: if you look at the female plug on the back of the radio, you'll see round the circumference there are teeth, very much like a saw blade. If you look at the male plug, you'll see there are 2 little locating spikes, 2 little male teeth just there. So when you push in the coaxial plug, what you want to do is to put the male tooth in the recess of the female tooth. Just line that up, and when you push it, you'll see that you get a good contact. You don't want that to misalign. When it comes to screwing on the locking ring, now one thing I found myself is sometimes especially on patch leads, the quality of the thread on the locking ring can be a little bit to be desired, to be honest. And sometimes when you screw this on, it gets so far and it bulks, it locks up, and the antenna is still loose. What you don't want to do is just carry on screwing that on, putting on more force, getting a pair of pliers or something, or forcing that on. If you do get a very tight thread before it actually is completely screwed into the radio, my suggestion is you back that off. Just put a little bit of lubrication around this thread, something like Vaseline, or a little bit of, just a tiny little bit of grease. Normally that is enough to get the thread to go all the way. If it is still tight, again, just don't force it, just accept the fact that you may have a slightly dodgy thread on the patch lead. This one is absolutely fine. It goes on just basically finger tight. Again, you don't want it to get tight until it's right at the end. When you get to the end, tighten it as hard as you can with your fingers. Check the back of the plug here. You want no movement at all. If you do have movement in or out, backwards and forth, then again, back this off and try and tighten it again with your fingers. Sometimes if you back it off like there, I just backed that off and I've now actually got another 1/8 of a turn on it. The threads aren't the best on these plugs, but that is a fine connection. Just a note on antennas, and again, I know I keep saying this, I did make a whole video on setting up a mobile antenna and also a home-based antenna. When you buy a mobile antenna in particular, sometimes it will be advertised on eBay as a tuned antenna, already tuned for 27 megahertz CB. No extra tuning required. That antenna does not exist, unfortunately. Any CB antenna that you buy will need a little bit of fine tuning to get it completely tuned to 11 meters, and that is measured by what we call SWR, that's standing wave ratio. You don't have to know what it means, but what it does mean is the antenna will need some fine tuning. Don't be fooled into thinking you'll have a fully tuned antenna straight out of the box. To adjust your SWR, depending on the radio you buy, if you buy a more expensive radio, they sometimes have an SWR meter built into the radio, but it's most likely you'll have to budget for a separate, just a cheap analog SWR meter. They're about £15 with a patch lead. I say once again, refer back to that SWR video that I did for much more details on that, but just be aware that is something extra that you may have to budget for. Another accessory that you might be interested in is a separate little extension speaker. Now, most of these CBs, even this tiny one, have actually got a very loud speaker built in. They're really, really quite good. But if you're going to fit this into a car, and maybe you're going to fit it into a dashboard, an extension speaker is a good investment. They're not expensive. This one is typically about 12 or maybe 15 pounds. Now, these will plug into the back of your radio. All radios have a little 3.5mm jack socket. That is a mono jack socket. Just bear that in mind. I'll come round to that in a moment. So when you get your extension speaker, it will have a 3.5 mono jack. That will go straight into the back of the radio, and then when you switch the radio on, there you go. You can hear that's got a nice deep tone. It's a bigger speaker. And we'll switch that off. Again, if you're ever going to use the PA system, the public address system, that's where you would stick a mono horn. I don't know anyone that uses their CB for public address. Now then, that little socket is quite useful because although it's mono, we can use it for headphones. Example here, I've got a very, very cheap set of JVC headphones that I picked up on Amazon, about £6, I think they were. Now, headphones come with a standard 3.5mm stereo jack. If you plug that straight into the radio, you'll find that you'll only have one speaker in the headphone, either the left or the right, working, which you might be fine with that. Personally, I find that a little bit disorientating. So what you need is one of these small little adapters. You get these all over eBay and Amazon. They're only about £1.50 each. And what you want is a 3.5mm mono to stereo adapter. And then you simply push your headphones into the back of that. That goes into the back of the radio. And now the headphones will work out of both ears. It won't be in stereo, but at least it will be balanced. One thing I should mention as I'm talking about the basics is the microphone. Now, some CB radios, like this one, come with a fixed microphone. You can't swap the microphone out. You're stuck with the microphone you get. Fortunately, this little Radioddity comes with a very good microphone. Other radios tend to have a little socket there. This is a standard 6-pin socket on the radio. If you buy a radio that doesn't have the up and down buttons here on the microphone, sometimes they are 4-pin. I mean, simplicity in itself, basically, when you do this, just get your microphone. When you look at the plug, hopefully you can see that. You'll see there's a little indent on the plug there. So it is, in actual fact, it is impossible to fit this the wrong way. The indent will line up with a little tiny spike there just on the female side of the socket, but don't force it because these pins are very thin, they're very fragile. If you do force it and you happen to bend one of those pins over, you then got a hell of a job to get a skewer or something to try and line them up. So just very carefully insert the microphone and just wiggle it about slightly. Push it right into the radio, and then you have a locking ring normally. Again, just be a little bit gentle with the locking ring, back it off if it starts to bulk on the threads, and then fully tighten that into the radio. Job done. Sometimes the microphone goes in the side of the radio. Now, some radios, certainly older radios, they will not receive. You won't get any sound until the microphone is inserted. So if you set it up and you don't put the mic in, you switch it on, you've got no sound, that could be the reason. Another reason that if you switch the radio on and you've got no sound is that the squelch control could be switched on. Some of these, most of these radios now have a menu-based squelch. This one I think was supplied, but it was set on about number 5. So when I first connected the radio, there was no audio. So don't panic. Just read your instructions, go into your menu system and make sure that the squelch is fully switched off. And that includes the auto squelch if the radio has it. Going to bring this one to a close now. It's probably gone on a lot longer than I expected it to. I find my videos do that these days. All of those beginner's guide videos, like I mentioned, they're on a playlist, and I will link them in the description on this video. These radios that you've seen in this video today, I do have separate videos on these radios in action, maybe including this one. That might be coming up on the future. Depends how I load these videos onto the channel, so you can check out that. As always, if you leave a question in the comments, I will try to help you, put you in the right direction. I still answer comments on videos that are 10 years old. I always answer your comments. The only ones that I don't get is if you leave an internet link, a hyperlink in the comments. That now goes into my deep spam folder. That's just down to so much spam coming in, pornography, things like that. I've had to do that. And also, as always, if you do leave a naughty word in the comments, that gets buried in my deep spam folder, and I never look at that. But anything else, I'll be happy to help you with. So as always, I do appreciate you dropping by. There is the thumbs up from Fred in the Shed. If you get a second, just hit me a thumbs up before you go. I do appreciate that. It lets me know that you appreciate the videos, encourages me to do more. But as always, please, please, please stay safe, look after each other, guys, and of course I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, thanks for dropping by.